Seeing Yona who suddenly put up a fighting position, Hajin then confusedly called out to her, but Yona suddenly used her whip to strike towards his hand. It made his gun slip out of his hand, and as the gun flew upwards, Yona then wrapped her whip around the gun, and took it. The incident felt so fast that it made Hajin seem as if he couldn't react. Yona was then happy because she managed to take the gun from his hand. She didn't think she could really take it. Looking at Hajin who was just standing there stupidly, Yona wondered if he really wasn't that great. Yona then arrogantly said to him, "Without a gun, even you won't be able to do anything." But she was then shocked. The gun she had taken from Hajin suddenly disappeared from her hand. Seeing the gun that returned to Hajin's hand, Yona shockedly asked, "When did you take it back?" Hajin replied, "Just now." Yona could only feel confused hearing that. She didn't even see him move earlier. Did he use magic? Hajin was a little confused about how to explain it. He then told her to just assume so. Yona really couldn't understand it. Hajin didn't explain further. He thought, because exactly. This wasn't magic. The reason behind it was very simple. From the beginning, Hajin had wrapped the ether around his gun just in case in this kind of situation. Their situation was again at a stalemate at the moment. Neither of them started moving again. Yona realized that this situation was very bad for her. The room they were in at the moment was very narrow. She would still be in the range of his shots no matter where she ran. She also wondered, it would definitely hurt if she was shot. Right, if she was disqualified now, she would die first. Seeing Hajin who was about to pull the trigger, Yona could only resignedly close her eyes as if waiting for her fate. After his battle with Yona ended, Hajin then exhaled. Looking at his bruised hand, Hajin thought, his bone must have been broken if Yona's attack had hit him right. Yona was indeed very strong, but, looking at the vast room, he did not expect such a vast lobby to be empty like this. Hajin wondered, had they gone to another area? All Relic War participants are equipped with a life signaling device. The purpose of this device is to display the user's HP in numbers that others can see. This is a device that can indicate whether the cadet can still continue the training or not. So, if he uses his notebook to collect data from the GPS device, then he can check the live GPS data using the linked smartwatch. For example like this, he could now see Tomer's position during the training. She was in the toilet on the 7th floor of the basement at the moment. Judging from the lack of movement from her, Hajin was sure she must be standing there while waiting for the item. Hajin paused for a moment. He then decided to find out the other locations first. Rachel and Nayun were on the 3rd floor of the basement. They were fighting right now. As for the 5th floor of the basement, Kim Soho and Shin Jonghak were both there. They seemed to be heading towards each other's position right now. Hajin was very excited to see that. That's a huge matchup. He wondered if there was any CCTV near them. After searching for a while, Hajin finally found it. He then immediately hacked it to watch the fight between the two best cadets in Cube. Seeing him, Jonghak then said that he knew this day would come. Soho was the same. Hajin now completely forgot about the training and focused on watching the fight between the two of them. After they both took fighting positions, Soho then told him to come forward. He would show the difference in strength between them, and while Hajin was busy watching the fight of the two of them, someone suddenly darted past him at this time. It made him surprised and woke up. Seeing the person who quickly climbed the stairs to the next floor, Hajin thought, that's really a noisy way to go through this area. But it managed to make Hajin refocus on his original goal. He had to go to Tomer now. After he looked at the clock for a while, Hajin then immediately set off. Somewhere on the 3rd floor of the basement, a cadet looked very desperate when faced with the opponent in front of him at the moment. He then immediately said that he gave up. Right at that moment, his eyes were suddenly covered with a black veil just like when this training started. The reason why the cadet could be so desperate to give up was because the opponent he was facing at the moment was Chai Nayun. This was her 3rd kill. She felt this was quite easy. She didn't expect, in just less than 3 months after changing her main weapon to a sword, she turned out to be this good at using it. She felt she was quite talented in using a sword, but her attention was then immediately distracted when someone suddenly called her. It was her friend named Giun. Giun was very happy when she saw her and immediately ran to her. She was grateful for being safe. Seeing her, Nayun then asked, "Where have you been?" Giun said, "While she was hiding, she was suddenly caught by the black team. She could barely escape earlier. She also ran out of arrows. When running away, she really felt sad when remembering that." Nayun chuckled at that. She was sure she must be tired. She also felt happy to meet her here. Even though a support like Giun was weak in direct combat, she could provide a lot of help in combat using her buff skills. With a beaming face, Giun said, "Even so, I can defeat one person by using the weakening debuff." Hearing that, Nayun then said, "Then, let's go get points." Giun was surprised for a moment by her invitation. But she then immediately accepted her invitation. She also told her quite important information. "Rachel is on this floor." Nayun was surprised to hear that, but her attention was then immediately distracted when she heard the sound of footsteps from the direction of the stairs in front of her. Jiun said that she was also very surprised at that time. She immediately ran away as soon as she saw her, but Nayun then asked her to be quiet for a while. With a vigilant attitude, Nayun then looked at the stairs in front of her. Nayun then put up a fighting stance and asked Jiun to stand behind her, although she was confused by it, but Jiun obeyed. Shortly after that, the sound of footsteps kept getting closer, until finally the person was in front of them. They were both then surprised to see that person. She turned out to be Yona. She looked very tired with her breath panting at the moment. Seeing that, Nayun then immediately walked up to her and asked, "Why are you sweating so much? Are you dealing with someone?" While wiping her sweat, Yona replied, "That person." Hearing that, Nayun then knew that she meant Hajin. Hearing that Yona had just faced Hajin, Jiun then asked her, "Did she beat him?" Yona was quite surprised by her question. Jiun asked like that was because the distance between the ranks of the two of them was very far. Yona felt hesitant to answer. She then recalled the incident at that time. When Yona was resignedly waiting for her fate, Hajin suddenly tapped her on the shoulder. While walking past her, he said that this was just the beginning of the war, so he told her to relax. Yona was then dumbfounded by that. She then looked back, and saw Hajin, who was now walking further away from her. While acting strong, Yona then replied, "Not yet." She felt embarrassed to say the actual result. She was the one who was almost defeated by him. Hearing that, Nayun then confusedly asked, "What did he do?" Yona said that she was not sure. While chuckling, Jiun wondered, maybe he was looking for Rachel. Nayun was then confused to hear that. "Why did he do that?" Jiun said, "Because he liked Rachel." They were both then stunned. Nayun was then very surprised when she heard that. She could not believe what she had just heard. With shaking hands, Nayun then imagined that situation. She stammeringly asked, "What was she talking about?" Jiun asked, "Did she not know?" It was a rumor that was widespread in Cube lately. Hearing that, Yona suddenly said that it was a bullshit rumor. They were both then equally surprised to hear that. Yona herself actually just heard the rumor. This mock relic war has a high percentage of their grades, so there is no time for them to waste by thinking about that silly rumor. Yona then asked, more importantly, has she found the location of the relic? Jiun answered yes, she got one. She found an NPC on the way here. While Nayun herself was still deep in thought at the moment, she still couldn't believe what she had just heard. Yona was happy to hear she had gotten the relic. She then invited them to move it to the first floor right now, but Nayun was just in a daze. She still couldn't wake up from her shock. She then called Jiun. Jiun confusedly turned to her. Nayun said, "As Yona said, the rumor might not be true. Most likely the rumor started to spread because they were a group." Hearing that, Jiun also felt that it made sense, but everyone was talking about the rumor, so she wondered if there was a possibility that the rumor was true. Hearing that, Nayun immediately said that it was impossible. She was very sure of that. Yona chuckled at her attitude, but her attention was then immediately distracted when she felt something from above them. She then could only stare in horror when she saw various arrows raining towards them. As the arrows came closer and were about to hit Jiun, Yona worriedly called out to her. She then immediately moved closer to her and quickly dispelled the arrows using her whip. Jiun was then shocked at the sudden turn of events. Luckily Yona was able to react quickly, otherwise she might have been disqualified by now. After they woke up from their shock, they then asked her if she was okay. Yona then calmed them down. She said that something like this wouldn't hurt her. She told them to put it aside. Hearing that, while taking out her sword from its sheath, Nayun then angrily asked, "Who did that?" She told them to get out. Shortly after that, they then heard many footsteps moving towards them. The perpetrators of the arrow shooting at them turned out to be Rachel and her group. Nayun was then shocked to see that. She then angrily called her a coward for making such an attack. But Rachel didn't care at all. She then took out her rapier, and calmly told her group to attack them. Hearing that, they then immediately moved to attack them. Seeing that, Yona then immediately told Jiun to hide. Jiun understood, but Even before she could run far enough away from there, an archer from Rachel's group then shot at the road in front of her. They seemed like they wouldn't just let her get away from there. Nayun then felt worried seeing that, but her worries ended badly for herself, because her opponents immediately took advantage of her distracted moment to attack her. Nayun then immediately moved back to open the distance, seeing that. A swordsman from Rachel's group optimistically thought, with the two of them here, even a Chai Nayun shouldn't be able to win, right? Nayun was silent for a moment. She looked very annoyed at this time. She then told them to move aside, but her voice sounded so faint that the two of them couldn't catch it clearly. While swinging her sword at them, Nayun said that she was very busy, so she told them to step aside. Her attack was really strong that it could knock them both out easily. As for Yona herself, she was now clashing with a swordsman. Their fight seemed to be quite fierce. Because Yona was seen breathing heavily, after observing her for a moment, the swordsman then knew she was holding them back from approaching Giun. He wondered, did Yona always do sacrificial acts like this, or maybe, a conjecture then appeared in his head. He then immediately told them that he thought Giun was holding the relic. He asked them to find her. The three of them then felt anxious hearing that. Shortly after that, Giun's hiding location was soon discovered by an archer from Rachel's group, and just as the archer was about to threaten her to quickly hand over the relic, he was surprised to see Nayun quickly moving towards them, but Nayun was then surprised when she saw a sword slash that slashed the road in front of her. Nayun immediately turned alert seeing that it was not a slash that she could casually parry. The power of the slash was so strong that it seemed to split the floor in front of her. Nayun knew the only person with a technique that had this much power was Rachel, and as Rachel moved to attack her, Nayun immediately moved backwards to avoid her attack. Rachel was quite surprised to see her able to avoid her sudden attack, but her attack certainly would not stop there. She then relentlessly moved to attack Nayun. Nayun looked quite overwhelmed in deflecting her attacks. Even her powerful sword that usually won the fight quickly could be beaten back because of her strength. She admitted she was really strong. Nayun knew that Rachel realized that her sword skills were lacking, so she cornered her. Nayun could only curse her helplessness at the moment. She was already troubled just by blocking her attacks. She was also feeling quite annoyed at the moment, but she certainly wouldn't feel hopeless just by that. Nayun then increased the power of her attack, which made Rachel retreat backwards. Not wasting that, Nayun then coated her sword with her mana. She really didn't want to lose against Rachel. She was determined to win against her this time. After that, Nayun then slashed her sword towards her. Rachel was surprised to see that the impact of her sword slash could be so strong. She also realized her energy suddenly changed. She also admitted that her mana was really amazing, but she was still inexperienced in using it. Rather than trying to counterattack, Rachel thought it would be better if she dodged to wait for an opportunity. But a very unfortunate incident suddenly happened to her at this time. Her leg suddenly sprained when she was about to move to dodge. The two of them were both surprised to see that, not wasting the opportunity. Nayun then immediately rushed to move to attack her. When her attack was about to land, Nayun then asked her, lost where your focus was, and when Nayun's sword attack finally landed, the impact was so great that it destroyed part of the floor in that room, but fortunately Rachel was able to quickly dodge the attack. She almost met her defeat earlier. Rachel then planned to shorten their distance, but he was once again struck by misfortune. The floor she was currently standing on turned out to be so fragile because of the impact of Nayun's attack earlier. Rachel then could only be shocked and she saw herself plunging downstairs. Nayun was just as shocked as she was when she saw that unexpected event. Not only her, Yona, Giun, and all the members of Rachel's group who saw were equally shocked. They then worriedly called out to Rachel, who was now free-falling downstairs. The fight between Nayun and Yona against Rachel's group came to a halt as they witnessed that a huge hole was created where Rachel fell earlier, but fortunately the distance between each floor was not so high that Rachel could still survive. She really did not expect the floor to suddenly collapse like that. After they finally woke up from their shock, they then shouted that the floor had collapsed. Hearing that, Rachel came to her senses. There was no time for her to think about this. She had to return to her group immediately, but she was then surprised when she heard the sound of footsteps from behind her. It turned out to be Kim Suho. Seeing Suho, who took out his sword from its sheath and his white uniform, Rachel could only lament her misfortune. Why should it be now? Not giving her time to think further, Suho then immediately moved to attack her. A thunderous sound was then created due to the clash between their attacks. Meanwhile, on the 6th floor of the basement, Hajin was there now, looking at the CCTV installed. Along the way, Hajin thought he should be careful so as not to attract suspicion. While standing right in front of the toilet, Hajin paused for a moment. He then clumsily said, "I think I will look for the relic in the toilet." After saying that, he then went inside. When he got inside, he was then confused and surprised when he saw someone hiding in one of the toilets there. After he opened the toilet door, he then saw a man shivering in fear while holding the relic in his hand. Hajin did not expect that there was really a relic here. Hajin then casually took the relic from the man's hand, while crying in fear. The man then immediately ran from there and asked him to spare his life. After the man ran far enough from him, he then slowly disappeared. Seeing that, Hajin thought, the hologram really looks like the real thing. He also felt it was quite ridiculous. After all, he found the relic by accident. He also felt he should immediately think of a way to get rid of Tomer. While looking down, Hajin thought, Tomer is right down here. She is waiting in the toilet on the 7th floor of the basement. Hajin then rechecked the message that the agent sent to Tomer. There is a management center in area B3 on the 7th floor of the basement. The item is placed there. Pick it up at 11 p.m. because the management center will be completely empty at that time. Hajin pondered for a moment reading that. There were 15 minutes left before the appointment time arrived. He wondered, what should he do? But, he then immediately thought of a plan. While looking towards the vent above him, Hajin believed this vent should be connected to the 7th floor. After thinking of the plan, Hajin then started the action. He then used Stigma's mana, and turned it into smoke magic that could put Tomer to sleep. Right after that, a smoke then appeared from his wrist. Hajin was happy to see that it worked. Now, he just needed to let the smoke pass through the vent. In the toilet on the 7th floor of the basement, Tomer was seen sitting in the toilet while waiting for the appointment time to arrive. But, she then felt disturbed by the sudden arrival of smoke into her room. She then flung her hands to drive the smoke away, but it was useless, because the smoke magic moved based on Hajin's wishes, so it was useless for her to try to fling it away. Hajin then controlled the smoke to enter Tomer's nose, relying on the ability to penetrate objects from 1,000 miles eyes. He then saw Tomer, who coughed for a moment and stood up staggeringly. Tomer felt very sleepy at this time, but she realized that she should not fall asleep here, but she seemed unable to resist her sleepiness, and finally fell asleep there. Hajin then felt happy to see that his plan was going perfectly. There were only 7 minutes left until the appointment time arrived. In a place that looked like an office room on the 7th floor, the entrance to the room suddenly opened at this time. It was certainly Hajin's doing. The room was the management center mentioned by the agent in the message he sent to Tomer. Before entering the room, Hajin nervously wondered. There was no one inside. Right after he finally went inside, he then saw a box on one of the desks there. Hajin wondered, is that the box? And when Hajin took and opened the box, he was then stunned when a bright light appeared from inside the box. Inside the box, there was an item called the Weakening All, an all that would weaken the target when it hit the target. This was reinforced with advanced enchantment weakening. Reading that, Hajin amazedly wondered, what kind of all is this? This even has advanced enchantment. Hajin swallowed. Although this item was not a relic, but this was worth at least hundreds of millions, and the thing that made him happy was, this thing was now his. After getting what he was looking for, Hajin then immediately returned to the 6th floor. He had deleted all the CCTV recordings, so all problems were resolved. But he was then surprised when he saw Rachel there. He was confused why she was on the 6th floor, besides, why her appearance was so shabby like that. Hajin then approached her and whisperingly called her. Rachel was very surprised when someone suddenly called her from behind. Seeing her reaction, Hajin immediately said, "It's me." He asked her to calm down. He was also from the black team. He also apologized for surprising her. Rachel immediately felt relieved after knowing it was him. Hajin then asked, "What happened? Why do you look like that?" Rachel was silent for a moment. She then said, she was trying to do an ambush, but unfortunately she failed. Hajin could only be silent to hear that. Rachel continued, then, she met Kim Soho. She desperately ran away, but Nayun and Yona chased her, and when she managed to escape from them, there was a mage who shot magic at her. Hajin could only sigh at her story. She had apparently gone through a lot. Rachel then asked him, how many people had he defeated? Hajin replied, 0. He asked, what about you? Rachel helplessly replied. She only defeated one. Hajin was silent for a moment looking at Rachel, who sighed with disappointment. If left alone, she will get a low score in the relic war. It is not a difficult matter to catch up with the score. It doesn't matter if he is in the middle rank, but not for Rachel. That's because her goals are set really high. Hajin said that it's not too late now. He then showed her the relic he had found earlier. Rachel was surprised to see that. She asked, "Did you find this?" Hajin did not answer and told her to take the relic to the top floor. She was faster than him. Rachel was then surprised to hear that, and when Rachel was about to refuse that, Hajin immediately interrupted her and told her to just take it. He said that he wanted to help her. Hajin's face looked very serious when saying that. Rachel didn't know what else to say at the moment. Hajin continued, "And at the end towards his right, there's an emergency staircase. There won't be that many people on that side," but Rachel still felt hesitant at the moment. Was it okay for her to do this? But her attention was soon distracted when she heard someone angrily calling her from behind. It turned out to be Nayun and her group. Hajin also felt quite anxious seeing that. It seemed like it would be difficult to deal with 6 people with just the 2 of them. Nayun was then surprised when she saw who. She also saw Rachel, who was holding the relic at this time. She then said to her group that Rachel had stolen the relic from someone else. Nayun and her group then angrily rushed towards them. Seeing that, Hajin then immediately told Rachel to leave, but Rachel was hesitating at the moment. Seeing that, Hajin once again told her to leave. He said he would buy as much time as possible. Rachel could only be stunned to hear that. Her heart was beating very fast at the moment. With a blushing face, Rachel then thanked him. An archer from Nayun's group was then surprised when she saw Rachel running away from there. She then said, "Did you think I would let you go?" She then immediately shot an arrow at her. And when the arrow shot was about to hit her, a bullet suddenly blocked the arrow. The archer was then surprised. When she saw the arrow sent back towards her, the bullet shot was certainly Hajin's doing. She could only feel annoyed at that. The archer then told Yona that she would pursue Rachel with Junyoung, but Yona immediately rejected her plan. She told them not to split up. He was a tough opponent. Seeing Hajin, who was now standing alone there, Nayun then asked him, "Do you intend to fight 6 people alone? Are you crazy?" Hearing that, Hajin just answered casually. When looking at the corridor where they were, Hajin was quite grateful. Fortunately, there were many objects that he could use as handles here. He might be able to escape with parkour. Hajin then said to them, "We will only know the results when we try." Hajin's goal was not to fight them, but to buy time. Seeing Yona and Nayun, who were just silent, a man with an axe in his hand then asked, "Why are you so afraid? It's just a boy with a gun," while coating his whole body with magic power. The man then said, "If no one came forward, then he would go first." Nayun could only feel surprised when she saw the man come forward so carelessly, as if underestimating the opponent in front of him. Hajin did not panic at all. With a calm attitude, he then shot the man using his gun. It succeeded in making the man afraid to come forward and retreat backwards, but the man was then surprised when he saw a whip and arrows streaking past him. The whip and arrows were of course from Yona and the archer. Right after the man failed to attack Hajin, they both immediately attacked towards him. Seeing the 2 attacks, Hajin then activated bullet time. With his reflexes increased many times over, Hajin then easily dodged that 2 fast attacks. Not only that, with an accuracy that was impossible for ordinary humans to do, Hajin then aimed at the arrow that shot towards him. After the bullet hit right at the tip of the arrow, the resulting repulsive force caused the arrow to turn back and attack the axeman. He was stunned and broke out in a cold sweat at the sudden change. He was then sent flying backwards when the arrow hit him right in the forehead, but fortunately the arrow was not so strong that it could pierce his head. But it did manage to cause a bruise on his forehead. Hajin himself was shocked when he saw the arrow hit the man instead. Not only him, Nayun and her group were too. The environment was suddenly silent as they both watched the man who was now lying helplessly on the floor. Nayun then immediately walked over to him and asked, "Are you okay?" The man was really shocked and didn't understand at the moment. With a face that wants to cry, he then asked them, how could they attack their own team members, but his complaints were useless because a black veil suddenly enveloped his eyes at this time. It showed that he had been disqualified. He could only feel annoyed and frustrated about it. Seeing that, Hajin thought, it seems that his HP is really running out. It's a coincidence, but his attention was then immediately distracted when he heard Yona speak. Yona had guessed that they couldn't underestimate him. with full alertness. Yona said that she didn't expect that he had even calculated the direction of the bounce. Hajin could only be stunned to hear that, because he himself didn't even calculate it. His real intention seemed to just want to fling the arrow. While Hajin was fighting against Nayun's group, Rachel herself was now running fast up the stairs to the top floor. Rachel wanted to believe that this was not true, the rumor that Hajin liked her. When she heard the cadets talking about the rumor, she felt that it couldn't be true. She felt that it was just a rumor, but that was because she wanted to think rationally. Even if she knew the truth, that meant Rachel really couldn't feel calm at the moment. As Rachel continued to climb up, she then reached the floor where her group was. They were then surprised when they saw her. They were happy to see her safe. Seeing the object in her hand, they then asked, "What are you holding?" Rachel took a breath. And when she was about to answer, they were then surprised. They then immediately told the other team members that Rachel had stolen the relic. They were then shocked to hear that. They all then felt amazed and happy. Rachel was silent for a moment hearing that. While looking at the relic in her hand, she thought, "I shouldn't have taken this from him." Rachel was not in a position to allow her to harbor feelings for someone, because, for the good of her country, her parents, and the royal family guild, she decided to sacrifice everything. She had not given up on something she wanted to protect, but Rachel then held the relic tightly. But at this rate, she might end up just having expectations of his emotions. Rachel then called them all over. She said that there was someone they should help on the 6th floor of the basement. Rachel seemed to decide to help Hajin at this time. But, when they arrived at the 6th floor, they then saw a scene that surprised them. Seeing several cadets lying there helplessly with their eyes covered with a black veil, they wondered, "What is this? What happened? Is there help even needed here?" Rachel was really surprised to see that Hajin, who she thought would be in trouble because he was attacked by 6 people, apparently managed to defeat several of them. The swordsman then asked her, who needed their help. Rachel was confused about how to answer his question. She then said, she thought their help was no longer needed. This was a surprise to her. She knew Hajin was strong, but she didn't think he could fight 6 people at once. But their attention was then immediately distracted when they heard the sound of footsteps from behind them. The swordsman then immediately greeted the person. Rachel then happily looked back. She thought it was Hajin. She asked, "Where have you been?" But the person turned out not to be Hajin as she thought, but Shin Jonghak. With a grin on his face, Jonghak then walked up to them.